So I'm going to call this meeting to order at 7:01 with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Superintendent, will you call the roll, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Dr. Phillips.
Here.
Ms. Krebshin.
Here.
President McLaughlin. Mayor Curtatone. Mr. Green.
Here.
Ms. Barish.
Here.
Ms. Patone.
Here.
Dr. Ackman.
Here.
Ms. Norman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to say a couple of things before we get to start working our way down the agenda, which is on behalf of the school committee, a huge, gigantic, impossible to overstate. Thank you to all the Somerville Public School employees and their hard work and dedication to students and families and to each other during this incredible time. This is my 14th year as a parent in the Somerville Public Schools, and I've seen great transformations over time. I have never seen anything like this in the last 2 months. What our staff has achieved, literally reinventing education and systems, whether it's food, education, everything, payroll, it's all been turned upside down and topsy-turvy, and it has been an awe-inspiring thing to see. And I'd also like to thank all of our unions for working collaboratively and coming together. We are in the process, and I think have almost completed our third round of negotiations since school closure. That's a lot of work done in addition to taking care of students in the last 3 months, and especially a thank you to the STA for working so collaboratively since schools closed. This morning, the district's leadership and I met with leaders from all of the Somerville Public School unions to start talking about how to, on a high level, what this might look like. If you had attended the finance meeting just prior to this, you got the same overview. There's very few, normally by now we'd have a budget, we'd have public hearings, we'd have 20 coffees out in the public, and we just don't have any of that right now, and it is unnerving in addition to everything else that's unnerving. So I wanted to thank the union leadership for coming together this morning, and also to say that we have a negotiating session with the paraprofessionals this Wednesday, and I'm deeply proud and very, very grateful for the Somerville Public Schools, the city, our community partners, our families who have really come together during an extraordinarily complicated and often scary public health crisis and financial crisis that we don't really have we don't even know yet how it's all going to unfold, right? What we know today, it'll be very different next week. It'll be different in 2 months. As much as I like to know exactly what's going to happen in September, we can't possibly know because we will be in another world. So I'm humbled and grateful for all that's gone on and everyone's hard work. Has the mayor come and joined us? I can't.
I have not seen him yet, but when he arrives, I'll keep my eye out for him.
That would be fantastic. So normally we would have our student reps joining us. They are, both of our students, Katya, Natalia, and Kat, are wildly ambitious students, and I think they both have several AP exams this week, so they are home studying. They will join us next week. We have one person signed up for public comment, and so I'm going to, whenever we have it, I need to read this, so bear with me. Public comment is open to all Somerville residents. Before each meeting, we've done that. Speakers are allotted 3 minutes to speak, although depending on the number of speakers, the chair has the discretion to limit the comments to 2. Ms. Allen, you can have your full 3 minutes. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between citizens and the committee. It is a resident's opportunity to express his or her opinion on issues in school committee business. Public comment is intended for the school committee to receive input from the public, but not as a method to receive specific requests from which should be channeled through school and district leadership or individually to school committee members. To this end, the members of the committee will not reply to public comment in the course of a meeting, though individual members may follow up and items from public comment may be taken up in future meetings. The committee and the administrators will not be prepared to directly respond to students' questions posed in this forum. Public comment is a matter of public record, and speakers should be aware that all meetings of the Somerville School Committee are filmed live on public access, although I'm not sure if that's true right now, and are recorded for future viewing. That is definitely true. Public comments will also be made part of the minutes of the meeting, and submissions of a written copy of your comments is encouraged. Comments without a written submission will be summarized in the official minutes. To ensure multiple opinions are heard on a topic or for other reasons, the chair may call on speakers outside of the order of the sign-up sheet, and public comment is not an opportunity to speak about specific employees of the Somerville Public Schools in any way that they can be identified. Any attempt to do so will be immediately ruled out of order, and the chair and speakers will not be allowed to continue. So with that, I am going to ask that Julia Allen be unmuted. And Julia, once you join us, if you could give us your name and your address, that would be great.
Hi all, thank you so much. Oops, let me start the timer. Okay, or no, you start the timer. Really grateful for the work.
We're all learning. We're all learning.
Thank you. I just sat in on the finance meeting, and I'm really grateful for what you are doing. I'm curious. My address is in Everett, so I don't know if I'm allowed to speak.
Do you work for the Somerville Public Schools?
I do.
Then I'll allow it. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you so much. I live, yeah. Anyway, I was just curious about summer school programming. I know it obviously is really dependent on funding and is going to be very different, and I'm wondering what we're going to do about counseling resources during the summer and teacher resources during the summer. Thank you.
Superintendent, is that going to be part of your district report?
It is. It is going to be that we will absolutely have counseling services as part of the summer. This particular summer, because we know all that the families and the students have gone through. Given that we will be in a virtual setting, we will be ensuring that families that are already connected, one of our third-party counselors will remain connected and getting services through the summer. And those that aren't, we will have SPS counselors available. That will be part of my district report.
Thank you so much for that. Mayor Crittitoni has joined us, and I would ask, I think he has some words he would like to share with us, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Chair, I can wait till after the public comment. That's okay.
That was we have concluded public comments, and so I would like we had one speaker, and so I would hand it over to you, and then we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. And please excuse me because after this portion, I have to jump off to 2 other meetings along related topics. Trust me. But to that comment made from Julia Allen and a lot of the questions we have on finances, there's still a lot of unknowns in terms of, what our financial position is going to be, certainly. Also, how we're going to run facilities. I was on a call with the governor last evening, and everyone has a goal, I would say, to make sure, and I think people should know it's not a conclusion yet, that we're even going to be back in schools in Massachusetts September. That's our goal, or what it looks like, and that districts like Somerville, actually I don't know a district across the Commonwealth that doesn't need technical assistance and guidance to operate under new guidelines, which are starting to come out and will fully come out on the 18th of May. As we think about the 4 phases of reopening, reactivating parts of our way of life, our economy, and doing so in a way that we hope doesn't spark a resurgence greater or worse than the outbreak of the pandemic that we're undergoing now. That being said, along the fiscal side, I just want to report back to the committee and to the public. There's been no big change in our conversations with the Commonwealth. It's been very frustrating for local officials and school districts because we have no way to set budgets because we are getting no information from the Commonwealth. We're seeking at a minimum, at least baseline understanding what our projections for local aid in Chapter 70 are. Projections here in the city of Somerville overall are still uncertain and volatile and not looking good. We are facing projecting a 20% cut in local aid at the moment, which means about $7 million, as I stated before, with additional revenue losses. We're looking at a projected $12 million loss in revenues at a time when we still have to invest in our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to be living, as experts have said, with this virus for a while, for a few years at least, until if and when a vaccine is discovered or utilized, an effective one. In that time period, we're going to have to be able to respond and be nimble to this public health emergency, which will continue to evolve. And at the same time, it's going to take us a few years at a minimum to get out of the financial crisis, which is yet to be defined, because we don't know how deep the cuts to cities and towns will be, whether or not there'll be any direct aid from the federal government, whether or not that COVID-19 aid to states of about $2.1 billion in Massachusetts can even be accessed by cities. Right now, you can't access that money outside of money utilized in direct response to the emergency, and this money cannot be money that was budgeted. It cannot be loss of revenue. So there are very stringent parameters on how you utilize that money. That being said, we still have to deliver services. We still have to educate our kids. We still have to clean our streets. We still have to ensure public health and feed our families, and that's going to take some investment. So I just want to report back to the committee, we are not getting the direct answers and guidance that we need up to this point from the state. And when I say the state, I mean the governor's office and the legislature or DESE. I am going to be on a call later this week with Ed Bean, our finance director, with other state leaders and finance directors across the Commonwealth, with the Secretary of A&F, Administration of Finance, Division of Local Services, as we try to get not only answers, but push for other legislative tools that could provide potential relief to the city and school to deal with liquidity challenges, cash flow issues, and help us meet our goal in the near term, which is secure, not just secure, but sustain our programs that we have in place now, not go backwards. Make sure we're not losing jobs that deliver those programs. Not use the line from the superintendent, protect the infrastructure of our schools and city services. So on our own, we're able to do that in the near term. As you know, there haven't been any layoffs or furloughs, and won't be for the rest of this fiscal year, which ends June 30th. And that's not an easy task given what you see around other surrounding communities. I think Brookline announced today another 95 furloughs. It's about 200 in total, if I'm not mistaken. The city of Somerville's financial position, based on what we've done over the last 17 years, has put us in the place we are now to absorb the hit. But we can't do that for an unforeseeable amount of time. We'll burn through our cash and our position. So on deck, we're trying to understand what our liability will be, and we're looking for tools to do that. I just want to make sure I delivered back to the community and the public where we are right now, which isn't any movement from the Commonwealth. But we're going to continue to push. Hopefully by the end of this week, we'll get some clarity. I'm happy to take any questions before I sign off.
Thank you. Do any school committee members have questions for the mayor? And as a reminder, the way we will do that, if you put a Q in the chat, I will call on you. That's how we do questions. I will say we just had finance prior to this, Mayor Curtatone, and again, Finance Director Gorski did a great job of presenting the financial picture. And so if there aren't a lot of questions, that's probably why, but we do have one from Mr. Green. Mr. Green, if you could turn on your camera and while you speak, that would be helpful too. And
yes. Oh, that's cute. This is mostly for the audience's context. In finance, we just came out of the estimate of reduced revenue was put at about $12 million for next year, which I just think it would help people to hear what that actually means relative to the size of our budget.
And Mayor, can't hear you.
That's because I left myself muted, and I apologize. So in general, I think we're approximately $250 million operating budget, city and schools combined. So $12 million is a significant hit. You know, the city has put itself in a stable financial positions, given with a lot of work. City and school department, school committee, board of aldermen, city council, and executive branches over the last 17 years. Although we're not as liquid as, say, at Cambridge, we could do most of the things we wanted to do, invest in city and school programs and long-term projects. But with the $12 million hit and growing, remember that's $12 million in lost revenue. That does not include the things we need to invest in. So we're investing several $100,000 already in our COVID-19 response, and we'll need to do so moving forward. Hopefully, we'll be allowed to access major disaster relief money of up to 75%. And I don't want to get into the bureaucracy of that because I learned from the blizzards of 2015, you don't always get what you expect to get. And we still have other liabilities that we'll have to pay on top of that. So that gap actually grows over time. And so our goal right now is we're looking for tools for the here and now. We're getting out of, we want to get out of, looks like we're out of this fiscal year virtually unscathed. I mean, the fourth quarter, the last quarter, like any private industry, was tough for the city of Somerville and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts because the sectors of our economy, especially small businesses where we get meals tax and excise tax revenue, or even from our traffic and parking division, those came to a complete halt or almost non-existent today from where they were. So we're not going to see, you know, new revenue tools that we can generate locally, and we already in Massachusetts don't have the flexibility to do independent revenue raising, and so we're going to take a big chunk of our revenue that comes, majority of it's from the Commonwealth, and that's our greatest source of, I'm sorry, one of the three legs of the stool, from local aid, which we're looking at a projected 20% cut, from property taxes, which should remain pretty stable, and other receipts, local receipts, and that's where we're taking another hit. So anytime one leg of the stool is compromised, it obviously creates imbalance. We're looking at two legs here, use a metaphor, or a good analogy, and so it puts us in a very volatile position, but not only volatile, unpredictable, because we just don't know what the end game is with the Commonwealth, and we still don't know what the response is to some of the different tools, legislative tools we've asked them for, like questions. Is there going to be an early retirement incentive? Are you going to allow communities to think about pension forbearance? Will you allow us to reinvest the interest on bands, borrowing and anticipation notes to pay down debt service? All these things that could help us with cash flow and liquidity challenges moving forward. So we're getting out of the present fiscal year, and we need to deal with FY 2021 pretty fast, which begins July 1.
Are there any other questions from school committee members before I ask one? First of all, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for, especially in the absence of state and federal leadership. It is the local leaders in regional have been so key. But when we talk about going back to school, I mean, I was wondering if there's going to be any expertise. What do we need to do to the schools to keep them safe? You know, you think of the secretaries, and I think, you know, the plexiglass that you see at the grocery stores, those kinds of precautions, which obviously none of us are to have that expertise. Does the city have a plan on how are we going to get that expertise?
Well, we will seek out that expertise. We will work with the school department, superintendent, school committee, what that plan will be, and we'll obviously have to pay attention to the new guidelines that are coming down. And this will have to be obviously for the schools. We want to obviously all be back with our kids in school in September. We're still not clear what that looks like. All the kids expected to be at the full time. I don't see that for every school district in the Commonwealth. Some school districts already have serious issues of overcrowding. And as we all know, again, and I'll say it, this pandemic will be with us for a while, this healthcare emergency. And we're going to continue to look at removing activities or diminishing the impact of activities with great density. kids are on top of each other in schools, and you have to understand how to manage that. So we brought this up directly with the governor's administration, with the governor himself, that we need that guidance and expertise. How should we be setting up our school facilities? What do we do with cafeterias? Should we be testing all our workers, teachers, staff, and everyone coming into the schools? I expect we'll be purchasing facial covering, and which for all students and staff. I can't see that not being the case. And then how do school committees develop policies around this? So the short answer is will be seeking that expertise to provide the city and the school department guidance. This is going to have to be a collaborative plan. And then, and as we also mentioned, I'll tell you to the governor, we don't have time. It's May. We need to stop planning this now. That's not a long time to plan for fall open. I don't have to tell you that because you do more of it day to day than I do.
Thank you so much for that. I want to be respectful of your time. One last call, any school committee members with questions for the mayor? If not, well, thank you for joining us, and I hope you only have 2 more meetings and not 4 more meetings tonight. So
it's okay. It's all part of the new norm. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well. Superintendent Skipper, we would like to go on to the item number 3, the report of the superintendent.
Sure, thank you. So tonight we're going to continue on. Each school committee, we're trying to have a couple of different principals be present. I can't say enough for our school leaders and our staff and how they're working together collaboratively to do the best they can during this time as we transition and continue to transition into remote learning, to be able to figure out what does that mean and how best to do it, how best to support our students and our families. And, you know, I think it's important for school committee to hear directly from our principals, you know, how is it going? So tonight, last week you heard from Kathleen Seward and Sean McGuire. Tonight we have Principal Morales from East Somerville and Principal Piccarelli, who is at the Capuano. So I'd like to welcome them both and ask them to turn their webcams on so that we can see them. There is Principal Piccarelli. Let's see if we can get Principal Morales. There we go. Perfect. We're all here.
Welcome.
Oh, everything. So that's
Mr.
great.
Morales, you got dressed up for us. Look at you. All right.
I have on shorts.
Thank you for the full disclosure. I think it's, you know, we're all trying to adapt to this new world and get through the days, and some days are easier than others, for sure. So I also want to thank both of you, and all of our principals, all of our leaders, for essentially reinventing education in overnight. It has been a crazy time. It has been a demanding time. I'm sure everyone has demands outside of their work life. But I can say overwhelmingly the feedback I've gotten from families is they're grateful to be in Somerville, especially when they talk to families in other districts. And it's not just the academic content, which is appreciated, but it's the leadership of leading with your heart, especially during this difficult time. So, and you have some of our youngest and complicated and
Mary, I think you froze.
Okay. Mary, can you take over? Mary, am I frozen? Oh, shoot.
I couldn't tell who froze, actually.
Okay.
Gary, it's not.
I can see you now. You're speaking fine.
Can you see? Okay. So, Superintendent, why don't you introduce our wonderful principals who are joining us today? And thank you for having a very long day to be with us tonight.
So we have Principal Piccarelli, who's at the Capuano, which is our early ed and kindergarten. And we have Principal Morales, who's at East Somerville. And so who would like to begin?
Cheryl can go first.
Sure. So I just want to say, obviously, for everyone, this is a crazy time, an amazing time, though. And, you know, the educators at Capuano, our parents, our partners, SFLC, everyone has just been amazing. You know, we're all learning new things every single day. I'm learning new things. Children are learning new things, going the gamut. So we're at a phase now, I think, on this last stretch where we have a good, we're feeling good about the consistency of our plans. We've had a lot of support from Lisa Q and Early Ed and the coaches, and Ori and his coaches, Ori Herrera and Christine Trevisoni in the special education department, sort of focus in on, our path forward for the rest of the year. There's a lot of support from SFLC and our PTA and counselors. Counselors are, oh, I'm sorry, I was distracted by Mr. Morales, sorry. So there's a lot of opportunity. So we have counselors who will have open hours for children who might want to just have a little bit more experience socializing because they're, they have their class meetings, but some children are really feeling the hardship of that human connection. On the other hand, we have the gamut. We have children who are shy on the screen, and we're finding some, multiple ways to try to meet the needs of all of the families and the capacities, not only in schedule, but developmentally for their children. We have a lot of, thanks to the support of OVED and Mr. Caraballo, delivered multiple devices, over about 50 from our school, and then many more with Christine Trevisoni doing home deliveries. So we feel like we have a good handle on connection. That's our biggest success, reaching out to families. It's also our biggest challenge, to keep children engaged, families engaged. Their situations are changing weekly, and we have a team going with that, trying to keep them all engaged. This is a hard time, but I just feel like we're all going to come out of it in a different way. We'll all be different people when we're through with this experience, and to also be looking at education in a different way, which is, to our benefit. We also have families, our teachers are juggling families, so we have their families coming in, like their children coming into the meetings. One of our educators just shared last week that her toddler, when she went into her classroom, she had a toy device, a computer, and she just looked at her mother and went, "Shh, mommy, no, meeting, my kids." So she's learning how to run a virtual meeting. Yeah, I think right now we have also thinking about opening school next year, what that's going to look like. So that's another challenge for us.
Thank you, Cheryl. Principal Morales?
Thank you for having me here tonight. For me, it's an honor and a privilege to continue to lead and be amongst great leaders here in Somerville. When I came on board on July 1st, I didn't anticipate this. I didn't think this was going to be part of the deal. March 11th, and now we're on May 11th. 2 months since we went in the closure period. I honestly have to say that we have come together closer as a school district. We've come closer as a school. Our true humanity has gone to a different level. And I honestly say that. The compassion that is being displayed on a daily basis, the adaptability and flexibility of our staff. I can go on and on about giving out shout outs to our staff, but I am going to give a few that are very important. Our staff from March 12th on took on this challenge and embraced it fully. We are the largest KA school in Somerville, and we're proud of that. We also have a dual language program, which we're very proud of. Our complexities go beyond academics. Our social emotional curriculum and endeavor on a daily basis takes on a different level. The trauma being experienced by families because of this is a true reality. Our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our special ed specialists, our ESL specialists, our counselors, our redirect, our utility aides, our secretaries, student services, the special ed department, the academics department from central office, the superintendent's office. This is a team effort. You can't do this heavy lift by yourself. This is the epitome of getting together a staff and a community to rally. Our PTA has been phenomenal. They have been very supportive of our families. We have teachers that we have to remember are also parents. We have teachers that we have to remember are also caregivers. We have teachers that we have to remember they're humans. They're not immune to this. And yet our teachers are working probably harder now. Our staff is working harder now than we were before March 11th. It is a true reality of where we're at right now. And we're very proud, and we carry ourselves with dignity and professionalism because this is what we are. We're here for kids and families, and that's our charge on a daily basis. Our family liaison with the SFLC, we're privileged to have a full-time family and community liaison at East. She has been phenomenal in connecting families, providing families with the services they need and the support they need, from food, from housing and security, from internet connections. We have at the East distributed the most devices out of any school in the district. That just shows us a true humongous need in our school, and it's still ongoing. Again, this is a team effort. Do we have challenges? Yes, we have two primary challenges that I see. And one is to continue to engage our students in an academic and social emotional realm on a daily basis from now until June 19th and beyond. That is a challenge that we have. Students will go through peaks and valleys. They're engaged today, not engaged tomorrow because of the reality faced at home and the distractions faced at home. And our teachers, we have to remember that our teachers, you know, we're at the brink of when, you know, at this stage of giving them the necessary leeway. The spring break was great, but now we're in an 8-week stretch, which we have 6 weeks left. And how do we get there? And lastly, how do we identify those students that have that academic gap, that have that need, whether it's in special needs or language? And how can we identify those students to provide those needed services in the summertime if funding's available and we're able to do that? Again, this has been an incredible challenge, one that we've taken on fully. We're proud of our work. I'm proud of our team. I tell them every day, I'm proud of what they do for us. I'm proud of what they do for our kids. And I tell them and I leave them with this: take care of yourself, take care of your students, take care of your family, and take care of your neighbors. And again, an honor and a privilege, and thank you for having me.
Well, Principal Morales, you may have been in the district for less than a year, but you certainly have the Somerville values, and you are living them and breathing them, and the passion that you bring to the work and the compassion is very evident. And I thank both of you for being here, because you do younger kids, families who are under more, for a variety of reasons, under more challenges, and also just the sheer number of students that you have between your two schools, especially at the East, is significant. So the amount of work that you are doing with what apparently to be great, good cheer, is remarkable. So thank you. Superintendent, did you want to get in there? Did I cut you right off?
Just, you know, to both Cheryl and to Obed, I mean, you know, Cheryl with the youngest students, and you know, families trying to figure out how to help them engage. It's often the parent that is relied upon to engage, and so there's extra dynamics there. You know, the additional device, you know, going to the Amazon Fire. So there's been lots of levels of complexity there with the younger students. And younger students are just, they're more, you know, they're used to being in the physical space of the educators. So it's just a very different world, needing to navigate that remotely. You know, and then for Obed and his families, you know, as he elegantly spoke to, there's been lots of layers to get to and through in order to get to the learning, some of which we're still working through. And, you know, I think this, you know, we're a beautiful urban district, and this, you know, these two schools really exemplify all of the different issues. And, you know, rather than ignore or overlook, I think, you know, both of them are great educators who have embraced them with their staffs to figure out how do we work through these so that no student at all, no family is left behind. And that's not even accounting for the number of families that we get contacted daily who have been, you know, directly impacted with COVID, either themselves being sick, a family member quarantined and needing to uproot living, or having, in worst case scenarios, lost a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle. So there's just a lot of different layers to this, and I just think of these two schools in particular as really exemplifying a lot of that. And just huge respect and appreciation for the hard work that our leaders and their staff do every day.
So much. I have Dr. Ackman and then Mr. Green with questions, and if there are other school committee members, just remember to put a Q in the chat box. Dr. Ackman?
Hi, Principal Picarelli, Principal Morales, thank you both. I can't thank you enough. This question may be through the chair to you and maybe through the chair to the superintendent. Seeing both of you makes me realize that you deal with a huge part of our incoming student body. And so I'm wondering, I know what the superintendent and what principals are doing to reach out to current students, but there is what was it, 524 or something, incoming students into our district, and some have siblings, but many don't. So what is our district doing? I know there's a lot that we don't know about what the fall will look like, but how are we communicating and what are we communicating to those families?
That is a great question.
It is a great question. Actually, something we talked about on the principal call today. As Obed said, and Cheryl has said, we've gotten very close as an SPS family because we meet on a almost daily basis. We just had the lotteries, as you know, and communication's gone out to the families. The next step in that is that the schools themselves are getting the lists, and then there's a process for outreach to those families. And the teachers then will have a process by which, for the kindergarten, individual families. So in the past, we had done that in a physical way. We obviously can't do that in the same way, but we are trying to look at how to be able to do that so that there's still the familiarity with the teacher, the ability for the teacher to be able to interact with the family as that kind of process happens, so that students feel comfortable and they know what they can look forward to and who they can look forward to in the fall. So that will all be taking place over the next several weeks. Lisa Q, who is the Director of Education, and Ori Harrell, who, as you know, does our K-8s. They'll be working in collaboration with the principals for that to happen. And then I don't know if either of you want to speak to just what it's typically like to get a new group of students, and what that might feel like at this time of year.
So I can speak to the largest group of incoming students that come to Capuano. So we have usually a nice, smooth transition week coming in and get to know you, and the parents come in small groups, and we're not really sure what that will look like for next year, but we hope to meet with small groups of people. In the meantime, we're doing something a little bit differently. Superintendent Skipper just spoke to plans with Lisa Q about we're going to have some sort of virtual setup where we will have an introduction to our school, and I will present something, and maybe we will have individual teachers if the teachers are assigned by a certain time, so that there is that connection, and at least children and families will see the teacher's face and the administrator and other people of our community. But it will look, that is different. We'll have to start a little bit earlier so we have time to make these connections before the start of school, because there's also a feeling of loss of the students who didn't finish up the end of the school year. This is across all schools. And if there's some sort of transition we can do in the fall when we come back in, so that we can connect.
That's right. These are all of the, go ahead, Mr. Rouse.
So, and I want to piggyback on Cheryl, because we've talked about as a grade level transition day. We were gearing up for transition day in May. We're expecting 75 incoming kindergartners to come into the East for 2021. We will have a virtual meet and greet with teachers and a tour of our school, and we're going to plan that with Lisa Q, and we're going to plan that with our kindergarten teachers, our counselors, and our redirects and our administration at the East, so that we can give our incoming families a feel for what it is to be a Phoenix at East Somerville Community School. it's going to be an interesting thing to do because we don't know what the makes up of the class, because the big question, as Superintendent Skipper has mentioned before, is the unknown. And the unknown is we don't know what the setup of the classes are, especially for kindergartners. Some of our kindergartners are fortunate they have older siblings in our school, but the majority of them probably will not. We're very excited about the incoming kindergartners, and we hope that we were able to facilitate that through that medium, which is not the usual way of doing things. But we're still going to open our school and welcome them with open arms.
Great, thank you
And
so much.
Just to Principal Piccarelli's comments, this is why, you know, and to the mayor's comments earlier, this is why we're looking for those guidelines from the state. We know what is possible when we're able to physically return and think about what we can plan safely and according to the guidelines for students at appropriate ages to be able to do that transition. It impacts not just our pre-K coming in new, not just our kindergartners moving to first and potentially to a different school, but also our 8th graders who are transitioning out of their 8th grade placements in their moving up ceremonies and going on to high school. So there's definitely several transitions we want to be able to build in to provide students closure as they move on to that next step in their career.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Thank you. Actually, my question dovetails nicely off of this one because it's about the other half of this, which is especially at the Capuano, but also, you know, at the East, students who are leaving, especially like those students who are leaving and going to first grade places or coming in first grade, where, you know, these are already, you know, students who are young and vulnerable, and now I've missed a third of their kindergarten year, and I have a kindergarten daughter, so I know how amazing the work that the kindergarten teachers are doing as far as keeping a sense of class, the limits of that. So when I do ask them to come back as first graders in a new school, what are we doing?
So last year, oh, may I?
Oh, certainly.
Sorry. So last year was the first year that Capuano hosted a K-1 transition because it was a concern before all of this started that the kindergartners going to first grade didn't have the same opportunities. So at that point, we invited the families to come, the community members of the other schools to come to Capuano, and they did a little, sort of getting to know Brown, getting to know East, and we combined the students who were in the cohorts to each school. That is something we could probably replicate easily virtually. I'm sure everyone would be on for that, but that's probably replicated. We got a lot of good feedback from that last year, and the families really enjoyed it. And children the next day in the cafeteria were saying, "Oh, I'm going to East with you." You know, they already had that connection with their fellow peers.
So it's an excellent question, in not just of the kindergarten to first, but you know, these key transitions. So we're actually there'll be focus groups that we want to look at the educational side to say what would be the best practice in this, what would it look like. Obviously, some of this is we don't know some of the answers to what the setup will be, what the limitations will be, but at least in terms of what we're hoping to achieve, that will be talked through. We know that for these key transitions, the first, month of school is going to need to look different. Integrated into that first month has to be the ability for students to regulate, come back, transition, on the social emotional, and on the academic side, the super standards that we've identified that we know run concurrent year to year, we'll be picking up those, reviewing those on the academic side as well. So it is going to look different for everyone in coming back. And I think there has to be a transition no matter the grade built in. But for those students that have the extra edge of an extra transition, and it's a big one, we have to account for that, and we have to give them closure and forward. That's all being worked on, as May and June will happen, so that hopefully the guidelines to the state inform that, as the mayor indicated, the guidelines for the city inform that, and there'll be a lot of work to do this summer to ready ourselves for the fall.
Superintendent, can you give a quick description of what super standards are, how they came to be, and what the intent of them are?
Sure. So people call them different things. I think the state calls them power standards. We call them super standards. Generally, we've been identifying all along what are the key skills and behind them the standards that we believe students sort of end the year with and begin the next year with. And so they're through lines. They're things like writing and particular math skills and particular English language skills that we know that when students finish, there's some regression over the summer or some forgetting, and then they come back and we need to do review. This year, much more so, given the fact that we actually missed concrete time. So we've identified those. They're posted on our website. They're part of our remote learning plan, and they were developed through consultation with the coaches and the teachers in math and English language arts. And then in the various subject areas, those subject specialists will be developing theirs for the fall. And then we'll begin the school year with picking up with that and doing that review and integrating them far more than we typically would in the lessons. It's just a powerful way of, instead of trying to inject in a short amount of time and accelerate, which really isn't how children learn. They need time to process. You can't replace 3 months with a week. So you have to have a way to be able to continue to integrate and have them work on those standards. So that's what we'll be doing with super standards.
Thank you so much. Ms. Krepchen, you have a question?
I do. Thank you. Great presentation. Through you, Madam Chair, I think this is more for Mary than for the principals, but you guys mentioned reaching out to students who didn't have internet access in general, as I know that's been an ongoing process. And I was just curious at this point, how many students still have that as a problem?
So we're still in a couple of hundred that we're still working through. The biggest issue, and Obid can actually address this as well, because his school disproportionately had a large number. It seems like there's a couple issues. One is it's a complex process, even with the voucher number to go into Comcast. It's a difficult process. And for families that might be living multifamily in an apartment where one may have had Comcast at one point or still does, it blocks the family. So we've purchased ahead of time hotspots from another vendor to be able to head this off, but the problem is they're back ordered. So our holdup right now is the same holdup everybody else has, in that those hotspots are back ordered. So as soon as those hotspots come in, we can then release them, but we still are continuing with SFLC support and the local school support to continue to work through the family. Jeff Curley, I can't say enough about his work with this. This has been a piece of his to understanding what a divide this creates. In every call that we're at, we're on, the principals bring this up because we want to ensure that those families do get connections. Kids are getting information from various things. Sometimes they're getting it from a phone, but that's not the best device to use. Sometimes they're getting it from a friend with a phone or a friend with an internet. So they're finding ways to access, but it's not replacing them having their own access and their own device. So that is really the standard we want to get to. Oh, but I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I want to just give you some idea of the process that all schools have gone through, and no different at the East. We went through a comprehensive inquiry. We surveyed the entire staff and our students. Within the first 10 days of the closure, we contacted 714 out of 720 of our student families. And that's a physical contact. That's a phone call, talking to the families. So that's like 99% of our students were in full contact. Now, I mean, Thank you. Superintendent Skipper has told you before that it goes in peaks and valleys where people are connected today. And we've had a lot of families that are now living where they were living. They had to move apartments within Somerville, all these different dynamics. And that causes a lot of issues with internet essentials with Comcast, because if you were living in apartment A and you moved to apartment D, they still think you have service. But to narrow it down our list, we had over 240 families that had no internet connection. As of the beginning of March, we got that down to about 50 2 weeks ago, from 240 down to 50. We are now, and I can confidently say, we're in the single teens right now, families that don't have internet at the East. And that work is because of the teachers and the support staff and everyone else, but specifically SFLC, Jeff Curley, the chief of staff, has done an amazing job. And our family liaison by far carries the big lifting in this endeavor. She has contacted these families on the phone with them for numerous hours. Some of these families are, speak only Spanish, and they have a difficult time engaging with folks on the phone because they're not able to understand the process. It's been very challenging. However, we're narrowing it down, we're closing it, and I suspect by the end of May, we will have about 100% of our families fully connected at the East.
And this is an important point, not just for this year, but because, as you heard the mayor talk about, the multi-year issue, with the virus. So we need to, whatever we need to solve so that much more seamless for next year. But I mean, to Obid's point, I mean, I'm just proud because in every school, every kid, every family is being accounted for and spoken. The families being connected. And there are some families that honestly will say to us, we just can't do this right now. We just can't. This has happened, that's happened. We just can't. And what we do is we make a note, and then 2 weeks we check back in with that family. And sometimes the family's like, now we can't. Great. Or sometimes they say, we still can't. We'll go back and pick that family up again. I think these guys know we don't leave any student behind. So that is our commitment.
Dr. Ackman, you had a follow-up question to Ms. Krupchen's question?
Yes, I live in East Somerville, and I know it's not all over the city, but I'm a customer, that's the word, of RCN. And I know that RCN has also started an Internet Essentials program. I literally was looking through my email offline trying to find it so I could forward it. I will do that. I just wasn't sure if you were aware, and if so, because I know there are those challenges with Comcast, and the possibility of just bringing in another service provider might help. So if you were aware, I wouldn't, but it seems like you weren't, so I'm going to dig through my emails and find it and forward the information to you.
That's great. I'm sure Dr. Curley will be more than enthusiastic to pick up on that.
Thank you.
Do any other school committee members have questions for our two guests tonight? No, I just want to say, my neighbor asked me the other day, and she said, well, school's not meeting, so you guys must have tons of time. And I was like, no. And if you could, the amount of work it's not tripled. It's huge, and it's not just the logistics of a classroom. I mean, Ms. Morales and Cheryl, you both have, I keep going back and forth, I'm so bad at last names, spoke to the heart and finding each student and finding the families and tracking them down. Superintendent Skipper, you have said this not just, you've said this again and again, that we are looking for each student, and some of them say we can't do it right now, but some of them we've lost contact with, and we still are looking for them. And to say that in addition to everything else that's going on, it's incredible. It's a huge amount of work, and it must be exhausting. And I love the message of take care of yourself, take care of your family, take care of your kids, take care of each other, because it really is the only way that we're going to get through this on every level. So thank you both for your leadership and leading by example, as well as being innovative at a very fast clip and making up some of this as we go. But I think so much of this time is a time to revisit our very basic core values of who we are, what we care about, what our priorities are. You both deal with some of our vulnerable students, and making that a priority and not losing focus on that is huge, especially now. And for so many of our students, school was a regulated, safe, consistent place. And for them to lose that, any of these contacts are even more important now than ever. So thank you for always going above and beyond, and in this crazy time, doing just extraordinary work and with such good cheer. It's lovely to have you both here. And I know you guys need to go because you have another full day ahead of you. And my guess is you're probably not done working even tonight.
That's correct.
So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for being who you are and being good leaders in our district.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both.
Have a good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Superintendent
Have a good night.
Skipper, would you like to introduce our next guest?
I would. So as you know, we've been trying to also update. So, you know, last school committee, we talked about early education with Dr. Q. And today we asked to bring her her Sparkle, Director Trevisoni from Special Education, along with Marilyn Brontis, who is the Assistant Director. I see that she's also on the call. So we would like to hear, you know, Christine and Marilyn have been doing such terrific work in figuring out so many things that don't quite have answers yet within special education, and really just trying to follow the North Star of what's best for kids. So, you know, I know that I just asked them to share maybe 3 to 5 minutes of all of what's been happening in the special education world so that school committee is aware. So Christine, Marilyn, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Wow, 3 to 5 minutes, huh? All right.
Speed round,
You know,
let's go.
that's right, we can do it. We've been busy, but you know, much like Mr. Morales and Mr. Piccarelli talked about, our focus is love. Love the kids, love your families, love your community. And as long as we keep that focus, then everything that we do gears towards that. It's all about making those connections, having those relationships, and providing the supports and services that students need to be able to access the curriculum and get the supports they need. I laugh all the time in meetings with Mary. She always talks about the operations side is going to talk and the academic side is going to talk. And I luckily get to teeter both sides, so I always get to talk. So we're doing a little bit of everything. Some wonderful things that have happened. I can't say enough about the special education department. I mean, we have almost 300 staff that work for us, and Marilyn and I have done everything we can to meet with every single one of those staff members. I came from my bi-weekly happy hour with my parents this afternoon to just try to connect with them and the relationships that they're having with students. It's amazing the work that's been done. I mean, we, besides the work at the buildings, we were able to supply iPads to our most severe students and deliver them. Myself, along with teachers and paraprofessionals, we delivered them to students and to families, and we continue to do that. We actually just last week delivered a communication device to a student in our autism program who had been working on learning how to use the device, and I actually just got an email from a teacher where the parent said that was the best Mother's Day present I ever had. He was able to communicate to me over the weekend for the first time using his device. So here we are in this crazy world of trying to figure out how to remote learning, and we have somehow figured out how to work with this family to give this child a voice and the ability to communicate in a way that he's never done before remotely. And that's because of the team that works with that child and the work that they did prior and the work that they did to support him. We now know that he wants a cat, so that's probably coming out of this now. But you know, it's just amazing that, you know, we work hard and we have a lot of stumbling blocks and there's a lot of struggles to deal with, but there's also a lot of amazing things that happen and amazing success stories that happen. And, you know, talking to staff, they just keep working really hard. A lot of, we've learned that working with kids one-to-one and working with kids in small groups has really been successful. A lot of the collaboration, I think, that's come out of this is huge. Not just special education, but from related service staff and how we work together. I learned ago how a group is working together a day, and it was Cinco de Mayo, and so they learned how to create maracas out of toilet paper rolls, and so it was kind of an OT. And the family had all their kids coming in, and all their kids were coming in, and they were all making toilet paper rolls. So it was a way to engage everyone and to engage the students in a variety of ways. So we're really excited about it. I mean, as Mary knows, we always joke around about my sparkle and my obsession with sparkle. I lose my sparkle on Fridays after my DESE meetings because something always changes from the week before. But we always figure out a way to pull it back together and go back to the staff and say, I know we said this last week, but now it's this week. Something that started this past week has been IEP meetings. We've been holding virtual IEP meetings and they've been going great. I think staff was anxious at first. Of course, it's something new. Marilyn and I worked closely together on that and had a very clear process in place for staff on how to do that. And we've heard nothing but glowing reports from parents and from teachers about those meetings, and that staff families are really appreciating it, especially around 8th graders and high school and anyone that's transitioning, so that we can talk to parents and help them to understand what the plan is moving forward. We are moving into creating remote learning plans, which staff has already been doing. We've been doing it pretty much on a weekly basis or notifying families how services are going to be provided. But as we've been getting guidance from DESE and under the new MOA, we'll be moving forward with that to notify exactly what those services are and how they look. Again, it's changing, as Mary had said. Sometimes families who say, right now, I can't access, you're often dealing with 5 or 6 sometimes service providers, right? And we say, okay, we're here for you. Our main thing is we want to make sure that you're okay. We want to make sure that you have what you need, and we'll touch base with you again in another couple of weeks. Not just to say, we're here, how are you doing, how can we help you? And it's really changed very week by week and day by day, sometimes for families. One thing we also started talking about this year, again, just with recent guidance from DESE, is around our early intervention and our students who are turning 3. Because again, with regards to what do we do? There are students who are turning 3 who typically we try to evaluate, determine eligibility, by the time they turn 3, because they're finished with their services with early intervention, which is different than ours, which is an academic model. And so we came up with a process for that today under the guidance from DESE and consulting with other people. And we're going to start that process immediately. And I was on the call this morning with ECIP, Joe Piccarelli, and the whole team to really talk about what that looks like to get every student. Not that every student is going to qualify for an IEP, but if you are turning the age of 3, you're losing your services. If we know you would have qualified for whatever reason based upon your disability and the significance of the disability, we would qualify you, give you an IEP and learn more, complete the evaluation process when we come back. If there's a question, we would still bring you in and engage you in the remote learning with our students to provide you those services and then continue the evaluation process when we return. So we want to make sure that every kid is getting what they need and has access to supports and services. So that's pretty much a good one, but that's about it. Marilyn, anything I missed?
No, I don't think so. I think we've said it all. We have a wonderful staff. They've all been working very diligently on behalf of their students. And, I credit to Christine for all that she's done to try to keep us as a cohesive group. She's literally popping into, I can't tell you, it has to be at least 10 to 15 meetings per week. And staff appreciate her diligence in that and seeing her. And she's a presence that I think is a calming force for them. And I really can't say enough about all of the team and how they're collaborating together. So, we're doing it on behalf of the students in our care, and I'm grateful that we have such a wonderful team working so hard on behalf of all of the kids. So,
yep, we're coming out of this stronger. I know it's hard, but we say it every day. What we've learned during this is what we're capable of doing that we never knew we were capable of doing before, and it's that ability to rely on each other, to build those relationships, to hold each other up. And that no one falls, right? We're better as a team than we are as individuals. And so that's what we'll continue to do. That's it. Oh, do you want to talk about summer school, Mary?
Sure, yes.
So summer school, I wish I knew about summer school. Let's start off that way. So again, in DESE's recent guidance, Marilyn goes with me. We hold hands virtually through the we've been told to have 3 plans. One is remote learning. The other is we'll be back in summer school the way we're supposed to be, or a combination of the other. I know that's hard to believe. So we're going to come up with 3 plans. We already have, if it's a remote learning, we're kind of already thinking about it. We're just waiting for the guidance from DESE. Supposedly, hopefully, we'll have more information by the end of this week or in 2 weeks. We've been told to hold on. You know, again, that impacts hiring and programming and all those other components, which myself and other directors were clear with DESE. We can't, how long do we wait before we do this? How long do we wait before we tell families? But the Department of Education was clear because, you know, we've talked before, Somerville can just make a decision on what we think is going to be best. And DESE's guidance is that if DESE determines we should do one way, we should do that way. So we're waiting for that information, and we'll come up with a plan. We'll work collaboratively towards it, and we've already been talking to all members of our team to get their input. So we get 3 choices.
That's right. And I mean, I think as we've already said, and you heard the mayor speak earlier, just to come back into the physical buildings in July would not be feasible. There's so much that has to be planned for that in order to keep students and staff safe. And so we're really moving forward to look at a virtual, we are looking at August with the hope that there would be some of August that we would be able to personally bring the students back in some way, shape, or form around transition. But, you know, I think until we get state guidelines, right now the state's talking about 4 phases, and it sounded like daycares and schools would be at the end of that. So we still have a ways to go with that. So I think, you know, for us, we're really, you know, looking at the individual students, you know, and looking at what is it that we need to be doing for each student relative to their learning goals through their IEP. And then we'll build from that, you know, with the families.
I think it's important to remember that we have medically fragile students that we have to think about and the impact for them. And I want to say we focus on the students, but we also have to focus on the families because, you know, our students and the fares for many of our families and for our students are significant. So I think it's something to think about.
I'd like to acknowledge that President McLaughlin of the City Council has joined us. I know he's been elusive at the Committee of the Whole of the Health Committee of the City Council. This may be his 3rd or 4th meeting today. So I would like to acknowledge that and then to take questions. Hi, Matt. Ms. Fatone, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair Norman, through you to Ms. Trevistoni about, it'd be helpful if you could share an example of how remote learning is working well for a student, as well as an example besides the access to technology where it's been a real challenge to deliver services, just to help me and anybody who's on the call to visualize what you're dealing with right now. Thank you.
I think, you know, thank you. I think that it's so complex on many different layers. It depends upon the student and the needs. On some cases, we're really focusing on the access. So I can say, for example, at the high school. At the high school level, the special educators are really focusing on working with students more in small group, individual type of things, providing access. You know, oftentimes you can provide curriculum and have office hours, but many of our students don't know what to ask. You know, they're not always leaning forward. So the special educators are leaning in towards them, contacting them, texting them, having individual conversations with them, or small groups to say, okay, what are we talking about? What needs to happen? I can tell you, I love this story. Again, I have the pleasure of meeting with these teams every day. It's probably the highlight of my day, no matter how crazy my day is. But we're at one of my multi-graded classrooms at the Healy Young Group. You know, they were doing the group, and it's co-taught with the speech and language pathologist and OT, and they're all working together, trying to do things together, which is great, doing some activities, really engaging them. But the kids are so excited to see each other that it's about 20 minutes of them trying to talk to each other that it gets a little crazy. So they decided as a team that they would split that up. And so they still do once a week so they can have that social interaction and that community type of activity. But then the teacher and the paraprofessional meet with each one of their students at least a half hour to an hour individually a week. That is beyond the speech and the OT, but to really give them that individualized instruction. We have teachers who have gone to homes to provide packets to people or to provide packets for their children, to provide food for families who could not access, even if they have electronics, electronics is not always the best. And so that's been, you know, just some examples. We've seen a lot of an increase in collaboration with many of our general education partners, where, you know, sometimes it's been a struggle in the past. It really has gotten better at that teaming and how do we work together to assure access for kids. And then really, besides the access going into general education, providing them with some of that outside of the class, small group, how do we talk, how do you access that? I think if you look at some of our more significant populations, some of the struggles have been engaging them because it's much more complicated. Parents have to be more involved. But I know in the beginning there was really a problem, but they're doing some small group stuff with kids using their communication devices and things like that. I think that for students who have some significant behavior challenges, it's a little more difficult to get them to sit in front of a, you know, to try and do a circle or to try and do an activity because of the possible behaviors. Or it's really hard for students to understand, my teacher's in front of me, you know, why can't I do this? Why can't I do this? Mom's not my teacher, you know, so it really gets into that. And so it's that constant trying to figure out where that push and pull is, you know, what does instruction look like? And it's working with teachers to say, we need to think about things differently. And for some families, for some of these populations, it's a lot of consultation with the parents. What's happening? What are your concerns? I had talked with a family earlier who was really struggling. You know, a parent was sick, they lost a family member, they live in a very tiny apartment, like all these things were happening, and they weren't ready to access anything. You know, and then they were overwhelmed because the child had regressed in toileting and all these other things were happening, and they were scared. And we pulled out to the team, and the team got on board, and they put a behavior plan in place, and they put a plan in place for the toileting. They said, let's not worry about this right now. That's not important. Let's worry about safety. Let's make sure these things are in place. And then when I spoke to the parent, the child's doing great. You know, where they were before, where they are now is very different. Or I get sent videos of students where they're doing decoding with sight word, you know, like the, you know, the sounds and the words and that, and they're doing it online with a paraprofessional, and they're so excited to be doing it. So I think that there's, again, the humanity of the whole thing has really been what's pulled us out of this, I would say. But it's about the relationships, and electronics is one piece of it. It's the engagement. It's the helping parts that I think has been our strength.
I just want to thank you so much. I know it was a little, I asked you to give us some detail, and this population is some of our most at-risk kids, and understanding that detail really helps me understand the challenges you have and how the staff has extended themselves to really do their best to meet the students' needs, and how the needs are moving every single day. So I think that was really valuable for me, and hopefully for my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do other school committee members have questions for Ms. Trevisoni? Well, you know I do, because in my other life, this is the world I live in, and I have to say, I have been blown away as the broader special education community has been coming together, and people with expertise in remote learning have been doing webinars. You know, I just had a great one with Moldover about executive functioning, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And a lot of what you just said too is people are beginning to think there's things that we can't do, but there's also things that we're learning that we never thought was possible that we could do. And so cup half full, I'd like to think by the end of this, whether it's in public health, education, special education, we will learn some new things. That said, the two questions I've been getting, I've gotten a couple of times, which is in terms of evaluations and remote evaluations, both whether it's a new student coming into the system, are you able to do that? But also, a family contacted me about their 3-year evaluation was coming up, and how do you do those evaluations remotely? And then the other question, I don't know if you can address it, is so kids who are on behavior plans who have been working closely with a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst. Now that parent is more in that role, and in terms of training, what's available. Someone said there's through the insurance that parents might be able to get some training. So now that the kids are at home and they are so much more dependent on their families, how do we help build the skills of the whole family? That was like 4 questions embedded in there.
I got you. I think I've got you, Karen.
Okay.
You can help me on it. So let me start with the BCBAs. I know that the BCBAs have been reaching out to all the families that they work with. Any child that was on a behavior plan, the behavior plans were shared and communicated. So if someone is struggling with communicating with the BCBA, they should contact their case manager. They can contact me. We've had cases where we've learned about some students who are struggling, that parents have said the student is struggling with their behavior at home, that it's not before. As soon as we hear that, we reach out to one of our BCBAs. You know, it depends on what it is. If it's behavior versus social emotional, we always have someone reach out, whether they're on their caseload or not. We want students to be successful. We've had students, we had a new student move in, I want to say from Brazil, who had just registered before we came. And we weren't really sure. I mean, we didn't have a lot of information. We didn't have a chance to evaluate. They're a new student, and a BCBA went in to observe some of those classrooms and to talk to the teacher to say, how can I help you? What are the things you need to talk to the families? So they're available and they are consulting. You can get services through your insurance, but some people are providing home services and some people are not.
Right. Just to be clear, it wasn't a criticism. I don't think, I think people have they've been reaching out, but it's not the same thing as a child being in school for 6.5 hours where there's professional staff with them. So the BCBAs that are reaching out, they're contacting with families. Families are just saying, I need to know more about how I can further support my child, and how do I get that training, because I know some of the home providers are, and you can do that through insurance. So it's the same thing when you're saying a parent consult. How do we?
And the team should be able to help them with that, Carrie. Not that they're not providing it, but to really support them around some of that. I think that's something I know many of the teams would really love to focus on that. And then that would lead to, I'm going to go to your first part. What I think that's going to come out of this, one thing that we often hear from families when we do education is we say, oh, well, they're able to do this at school. This is what we see. And then the family will say, but we don't see that at home, or we don't see that in the community, or we don't see that somewhere else. And so ultimately, our mandate is not just that you can do it during school, it's about that transference of the skills, right? Like if I really taught you how to do something, you should be able to do it in multiple places with multiple people in multiple ways. And so I think that's one of our goals. We often talk about during this time, how do we transfer the skills that we've taught into different settings, into the home setting and outside. We can do that, then it's going to help us to be better and help us to see what's happening for students. And with regards to testing, again, that's part of our ever-changing cycle, Carrie. I can tell you before last week, we were told we weren't doing testing, right? Because virtual testing, it's really hard. I mean, you're not, first of all, we don't have all our assessments at home because we left school and we didn't bring all our evaluations home. And not every teacher has a one-to-one teaching assessment, right? It's kits that we use. Then when you're testing kids, there's a whole question of standardized, you know, is it standardized? How do you determine whether it's standardized or not? So we are going to be reaching out to all families. We did get a list of all of our families who had signed consents for initials and reevaluations to communicate with families. Many families have said at this point, they don't want the students to evaluate till they return because we're still in the midst of all this and we're not going to get a true picture as to who they are.
Right.
And then the question is, are they valid? Are the assessments valid? At the same time as we do that, we're looking at, and Marilyn has participated in at least one, and I think you're participating in another one around how you do evaluations, because that's a question. If we can in some way get into school this summer, even for something, I would like to get some of those evaluations done. You know, if I can't get into school full time, you know, because we're all worried about that. I mean, our psychologists are on me every day about it. But I think that, you know, we also don't have the data from the schools. We have some of the data from MTSS. We have some of the data. So, you know, we're reaching out to families, having conversations with families to try and figure out, you know, where we are, what needs to be done, and then making decisions based on that. I think I hit three. I think I missed one, but I might have come
No,
back.
you're good. I mean, it's just such a complex time, right? And how do you, there's some things that just can't translate remotely. Any other school? Yeah, any other school committee members have questions for our special ed staff? Superintendent, did you want to jump in?
No, I mean, I think as you can hear, it is complex and it's evolving, which makes it extra complex. But I think, you know, Christine, Marilyn, and their leadership, along with the department heads and the special education staff, the special education secretaries, I think everybody is doing their part to make the best of a really difficult situation and try to keep the kids in the center. And that's honestly what we can ask for right now. So we'll work hard, and as the information comes in, you know, we'll continue to try to look at it and figure out the best way to do it. If we're able to get into school sometime in August, you know, we'll certainly try to accommodate that. We just want to make sure that everything we do is with safety of students and staff in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd also just like to, without going too far into the weeds, the state, from lack of guidance to ever-changing guidance, I think special ed has been a particularly complex part of remote learning. It's already a complex thing to implement because every kid is different, and I would say that the state, there's been a lot of conferences, calls about like, well, what did that exactly mean? And so thank you for attending those weekly meetings with Commissioner Johnston and keeping your good sense of humor while you navigate that on behalf of your students. So thank you for a very long day and for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, guys. Be safe.
Take care. Thank you.
Superintendent, did you have more of a district report?
Just a couple of quick points. I wanted to share that students and staff at both Somerville High and Full Circle and actually Scale, they're finalizing plans around the graduation celebrations. Students have expressed a desire to celebrate in person, even if it means waiting until the fall to do so. I know some districts elected to do virtual, but you know, we asked our students and families, and that's the information we got back, so we're going to respect that. We will, however, be acknowledging and celebrating this because it's such a momentous and important milestone. And so we'll be doing that in a number of ways by the end of the school year, and we'll invite the community to be part of that. So we'll be sharing some of that out at the next school committee. And we'll also, you know, share out how the community itself can get engaged in the activities, because it really is a Somerville-wide pride for Full Circle, Next Wave, the high school, and Scale. We are now, as we talked about tonight, in phase 3 of the remote learning. And we're continuing to follow the DESE guidance. Our teachers are doing an exceptional job connecting with the students, keeping them engaged through a variety of their own remote learning experiences, all while they are, you know, often caretakers for their own families and kids. most students are engaged regularly and they stay connected. It's literally a hands on deck, all hands on deck, as you heard earlier. If we notice a student is not engaging regularly, with the goal of understanding, we go in it, try to figure out what the barrier is, and then we try to provide the supports to the family and to the student to resolve.
Oh, Mary, we can't hear you. Catherine, can you please text the superintendent and message her and let her know that we can't hear her?
I did.
Okay. We can't hear you. Yeah, no.
Around family and student engagement, use of our various remote video platforms, and so forth. And so that will continue
Mary,
to
we
go.
lost you for a little bit. We lost you there for like about 10, 15 seconds. We
Am I
can hear
back?
you now. We can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah, you're back. Back
All
and
right.
better than ever.
I think I was talking about the professional development, and I was just saying that there's still a myriad of professional development we will be asking staff to participate in, and it's very much staff-led, and they range all the way from various school-based PD to family engagement and student engagement strategies, to how to use the remote video platforms, and also just all the best practices that we're developing and discovering as part of remote learning. So we will continue that work. And then finally, I just wanted to give a big thanks to Rick Saunders and his music team, as they really enabled the pickup of student instruments. It's concluding this week. The instrument pickups were scheduled by school over a 2-week period, and about half of the students who are participating in a music program this year were able to pick up their instruments last week. The Healy pickup took place today. Students at the Kennedy can pick up their instruments tomorrow from 11 to noon. Winter Hills pickup is Wednesday, 11 to noon, and West their pickup is 1 to 2 o'clock on Wednesday. So hopefully this enables us to get the instruments out to kids so that they can do it for the rest of the term, hopefully this summer, and then come back even better musicians than they left us. That's the goal. But big thanks to Rick and his staff.
Also, a shout out to the entire music department for their music videos that they have been putting out. They have been great. There's families who have played them again and again, and it's just one more interaction, more and more connection to school. So I'd like to thank Mr. Saunders and our entire music department for that. Does that conclude your district report? Oh, Mary, you're frozen up again.
Was.
Okay, fantastic. We have a few items of new business. The first one is a resolution in support of increased federal support and stimulus funding that was introduced by Ms. Krepchen. Ms. Krepchen, I'm going to ask you to speak to it. You don't need to read the whole thing. It's the first time we've been discussing it. We will put it again on next week's agenda. It's in the packet, and I would ask school committee members to look at it. If you've got suggestions or amendments, be prepared. But Ms. Krepchen, can you introduce the idea and give us a nice summary of it?
Sure, happy to. It all started because I saw that the Boston School Committee wrote something similar, and there was an email from the MASC encouraging other districts to take what they had written and make it their own if they so desired. So I took it, and mostly what is here is verbatim what the Boston School Committee wrote, because most of it pertains to us. I'm waiting on some information from the superintendent of specific numbers, like exactly how many Chromebooks we've given out, etc. So when I have that, I will plug that into the document. So there's some question marks and some highlighted parts in the document related to that. Otherwise, it's essentially saying that we would like the federal and the state government to give us more money so that we can continue to do all the great things we're doing. It's a page and a half with lots more words than that, but that is essentially what it's saying. One notable difference that came from Dr. Phillips was a suggestion that we add in encouraging the state to give us more money in addition to just the federal. So the one from the Boston School Committee just talked about federal support. I added in federal and state. And that's essentially where it is.
Thank you so much, and thank you for always thinking and what else we can do. Certainly advocating for funds at both the state and the federal level is incredibly important. So I look forward to having that on the agenda for next week and having you speak to that. President McLaughlin, you had an item of new business you wanted to introduce? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Green, was your question about the resolution? I just saw your cue there.
Either way, I can wait for
Okay.
new business.
Okay. Andre, was your question about the resolution?
Yes, real quick.
Okay,
Just,
and then we'll go to you, Mr. McLaughlin.
yeah, I can't wait to vote for this next week. I think it's important that the community understand that as a city, we can't run a deficit, and as a state, the state can't run a deficit. So really the only magic pot of new money that can come to cover both the rising costs related with the ongoing crisis and the kind of revenue is the federal government. And so it is incumbent on all of us to push the federal government to live up to responsibility to lead and help us find the money to actually do the things we know we need to be doing.
Thank you for that addition. We are all learning a lot about budgets and more about finance and budget development at every level. President McLaughlin, would you like to introduce your item of new business?
Sure. One second. Hi, everyone. Thank you all. Thank you, Chair. So I just placed an order today, actually, because Councilor Ballantyne and some other councilors had questions about the upcoming school year, the next school year, and DESE guidance on that, as well as just how things are going in the schools in general. We get the superintendent's weekly updates, so that's been very helpful. But she specifically asked about what DESE is saying about next year, and if they're not saying anything, which seems to be a possibility, we may not have that information, what residents can do to advocate for that. So if the superintendent could answer that now, that's great. If not, maybe an email response later would suffice, so I can give a communication to the City Council.
Sure. So thank you for the question, first of all. It's an important question, and it's one that I think you've heard. We're constantly sitting in on the DESE calls, whether they be for finance or education. When they come out with guidance, we always send those to the parents. So the last 3 guidance, which included the updates to the remote learning, when that came out, we sent that out in our update, and we will do the same in anything relative to the summer or the fall. There has not been official guidance yet on the summer or the fall. In fact, I think the summer is the next one up, and I believe that part of this is that it's very much intertwined with the state guidance around the use of buildings and businesses. So one of the things that the mayor spoke about earlier is that the state today began talking about a 4-phase opening, but it does not yet specify who is part of which phase. So the one question I happened to hear on the governor's press conference was around daycares, and that question basically said that's a complex question. In particular, daycares are complex and they need phasing of their own. That will be something that will happen down the line. So the only thing we know right now is that the child care centers are closed until June 29th, which was part of the, or June 30th, which was part of the original guidance. But there really hasn't been anything else relative to when schools could open, what that would look like, what best practice would be, what the social distancing requirements would be, etc. The mayor and I are both fully committed with my staff as well to be part of those conversations. We're all currently within the school side researching on our own best practices that are happening in states that are reopening, as well as in countries that have reopened. What can we take from them? What are the lessons that have been gleaned? Because we really see this as like an iterative kind of process. So as soon as guidance does come out, be absolutely happy to share that with the parents foremost, and then also with school committee and with city council. And hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later, because we're all anxious to get this to happen.
And Superintendent, is there any suggestion of anything that we could do, families, community members, city council members could do to advocate is writing to DESE, encouraging them to, is that a useful thing? How can we best support you in this effort?
I mean, I always think parents' voices are important. I think really the rub here is around safety. And it's, we're dealing with a public health crisis and the schools are secondary to that. The public health crisis has to sort of get to a certain point of control before they then can look toward the schools or and frankly, to businesses. So I think it's always great when parents share their voice. And I think they're as anxious as we are to want to have students back. But as the mayor has said and as I have said, we have to make sure that it's following the guidelines and with the safety of our students and our staff in mind. So, as soon as we get something that's actionable, we will work with it. Basically for the summer, much like you heard Director Trevisoni talk about, the state has basically been saying 3 scenarios: plan physical, plan hybrid, and plan remote. And the difficulty now is, it's working to the middle of May. So the idea that physical would even remotely be possible is becoming more of a distant. And at some point we have to really turn in terms of the planning. So because just even to do remote or some kind of a hybrid is going to take an incredible amount of work. So, right now, many of our partners, within the school district, nonprofits, they're already turned toward remote because that is what they are believing is going to be. And, like us, they have a lot of planning to do just to make that happen. So I think, that is the likelihood for the summer, is that we will continue in the remote fashion. We're hopeful, but again, we don't know, for August, in some portion of August, to be able to have students at least orient and come back in some form of a transition so that we can make September all the more productive. But to the mayor's points earlier, we don't know. So there's a lot of not knowing right now, which I think is driving many of us who live to know a little crazy.
Yes. Thank you very much.
If I could,
Yes.
Can I just follow up on that, Chair? Well, I do appreciate that, because I think, I don't know is a sufficient answer right now, because none of us know. But I am curious, so you mentioned that you're exploring other practices outside of what DESE is or isn't saying. Just so I cover my bases, what would happen if they didn't offer guidance?
Well, I think the chance that they wouldn't offer guidance is slim. I mean, they've offered guidance, be it not in the time fashion we always would appreciate. I think in defense of DESE, they didn't expect this either, and they're trying to grapple with solutions for the state, which is a much larger map. And, as we know with the virus, there's different areas of the state that have been hit at different levels. So I do think we will get guidance. I think that, I think what our hope is the guidance comes in a timely enough fashion that it allows us to be able to take it and actually make it work for Somerville, for us. We have our own situations with density, certainly with schools in terms of the class sizes. They're not as large as some of the other districts, but our enrollment has gone up every year. So our classes are very full. They're not what they were like 5 years ago when I first started. They're healthy class sizes. So we need to consider that. But there's lots of different kinds of practices out there that we're looking at. In some of the states, in countries, for instance, they move the teachers, not the students, as one way to cut down on how often the students are coming in contact in large groups with each other. Or they, stage for the lunches, that the lunches could potentially be some combination of the classrooms and other settings, and you can rotate in. They use all facility. So they look at things like the hallways, they look at the gyms, the cafeterias, the libraries, large conference spaces. So it's all space, not just the classrooms. So it really is it's going to cause us to think very differently than how we typically do school. To Carrie's point from earlier, when you first walk in, much like at the supermarket, there's plexiglass now, which protects the person that generally is the person greeting the customer. In our case, that is very often our secretaries and our SFLC person. So what is the physical barriers that we need to create in order to keep that person safe? Some face coverings, which, that is a policy change, right? But face coverings are likely going to be needed. And so what does that look like? What does that look like when the student forgets it or the staff member forgets it? Those are provided? What happens when they need to wash theirs and they need another one? So there's just so many levels of logistics, drop off, in the mornings, students, parents are accompanying, usually come in. That's their time to check in and so forth. Now you're adding lots of adults into a building with lots of kids. So how might we have to do drop off differently and pick up differently? And then I don't even want to get into the buses, but,
We'll save buses for another night. That
So
is
that's-
complex.
So I guess, Matt, I guess my response is we are actively thinking and looking about all of these things, even without guidance from DESE. But the fact is we do need to wait for the guidance from DESE to know that what we're thinking is appropriate and ultimately safe for our students and our staff.
Okay, I think that's a sufficient answer. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
President McLaughlin, thank you for being the conduit between these two bodies. It's important that we're all working in sync with each other. I will now move on to donations. If I could get a motion.
This is Laura. I was just going to make a motion to approve with gratitude the following donations from Carolyn Daly of Somerville, Mass. for $500 for the Somerville Child Care, Amy Murtzy for $500 for the Community Schools After School Program, Sana Bazaz for $100 to the Community Schools After School Program.
Is there a second?
Eleanor, second.
Second.
There's a motion by Ms. Patone, seconded by Ms. Barish. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of accepting these donations, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those
Aye.
opposed? All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. Are there any items from board members? There are not. And so with that, I will adjourn, and I just would like to say to my colleagues, to our educators, to our families, to our leadership, to our city council members, these are long nights and uncharted waters, and thank you for always being curious and asking good questions and just keeping our civility and our humanity, and I know all of us have had different moments along the way. This is complex, and it certainly is getting, as the numbers keep going up, closer and closer to home. So be well, and with that, we are adjourned.